I'm Michelle Lee, I'm 46 years old. I live in Kellyville in Sydney, and I'm going to be Australia's first female to row solo across any ocean.
One woman, one rowboat and the Atlantic Ocean.
You throw a cork in a washing machine and have a look at what happens to that cork.
This is the story of Michelle Lee as she attempts to become the first Australian woman to conquer the world's toughest ocean race, the Talisker Whisky Atlantic Challenge.
It's the second biggest body of water on the planet. Covering 20% of the Earth's surface, it measures approximately 41 million square miles.
It's like the old proverbial, needle in a haystack. You're just a blot, a tiny dot on this vast ocean.
I'm Lisa Goddard, and this is Michelle's story. It's hard to believe it's been a month since Christmas. And while most of us are still getting over the post-holiday blues, after 2 weeks of eating, drinking and relaxing, there was no such break for Michelle Lee, who's been slogging it out on the open ocean.
Well, you're top of the pops again.
Really? I can't believe it.
Michelle has now been on the Atlantic for more than 40 days. She's sitting in third place out of the 5 solo teams and 25th overall. She's rowed over 2,000 miles or 3,200 kilometres so far, enduring blistering hot days and sub-zero temperatures at night. And she still has 1,000 miles to go.
I love seeing these figures. It makes my heart warm.
She keeps a cool head by regularly checking in with Tony Roberts, her designated person ashore, who we caught up with in episode 2.
I don't know what you're doing, but you're just doing it properly. For example, at 4 a.m, you'd done 57 miles, and the closest to you was Wild Oarsman at 53 miles. And now at 8 o'clock, you've done a further 57 miles. So it's absolutely brilliant, the numbers you're achieving.
At this rate, Michelle should reach English Harbour in Antigua by February 15. But it's not all smooth sailing until then.
Yeah, we had sort of 40-foot swells at times. So it really was a question of just holding on tight, making sure that the boat didn't capsize. It did mean that we had quite a quick crossing because we had lots of wind and big swells, which means a fast boat. So, a bit scary.
And he would know. That's Peter Robinson, one of the 4 oarsmen who claimed the world record for the fastest 4-person row across the Atlantic and the race title when they competed last year. They finished in just 29 days and 15 hours.
It's the sleep deprivation, hallucinations, seasickness, pressure sores on your bum, blisters on your hands.
The crew of Peter, George, Dickie and Stuart spoke to the UK TV show This Morning after their record-breaking journey, describing exactly what Michelle is dealing with.
It's just a constant stressful environment, isn't it? It's any nicks and bruises and cuts and things just don't heal. It's constantly wet, and you're always sort of under duress. But the whole thing is both a physical and a mental challenge, and it's proven obviously really tough. But that's fundamentally what makes it so rewarding. It's certainly the world's toughest row and a hell of a challenge. It's just bloody great to be here now.
It feels overwhelming. I mean, the challenge, as we said before, is just a relentless, never-ending pain, just rowing, just the whole thing. And coming first is something that I suppose was beyond our wildest dreams.
Fully capsized, rolled over. Dylan was hanging off over the edge by the tether.
So what is Michelle in for?
So December and January are the ideal time of year to cross the North Atlantic Ocean, but ideal does not mean easy at all. As you know, this is a time where we have the trade winds that are stronger than usual.
That's Dr. Jessica Benthusen. She's a physical oceanographer based in Perth at the Australian Institute of Marine Science.
Now, along the way, they'll be experiencing currents, so the Canary Current near the Canary Islands, and then the broad north equatorial current that's flowing westward, and then joining up into the Antilles Current, taking them all the way up to Antigua. Now, out in the open ocean, if the trade winds are persistently blowing, this can lead to choppy waters, so waves that are generated up to 2 meters. And this is without thinking about the storms that can happen on top of that. Typically, the trade winds can be 20 to 30 kilometers per hour. These are considered moderate winds on the Beaufort wind scale. Now, if we're talking about strong winds, this occurs at 26 knots, and lighter winds can occur less than 10 knots.
On an ideal day when the conditions are perfect, what would it be like out there?
On an ideal day, most days, you would feel hot from the sun and sticky from hours of rowing, and you would taste the salt water dry on your lips. And after a long day's row, you would look out westward as the sun is drifting down, orange and red, and you could actually squint, waiting for the green flash that happens as the sun dips down below the horizon. As an oceanographer, I've also looked for that green flash on the voyages that I've taken out on sea.
And have you seen it?
Yes, it's a remarkable thing, but you're always left second guessing whether or not it really happened, so you try again the next day. The green flash occurs at that moment when the sun dips down below the horizon, and it also occurs at sunrise. But since Michelle and the other racers are going westward, they'll have an opportunity every night to see that green flash.
So we've spoken about what the ideal conditions would be. What about when it turns nasty? What about when a storm hits? What will it be like to be one woman in a rowboat when a storm hits the Atlantic Ocean?
I can't imagine being out there on a rowboat, so exposed and vulnerable to the elements. You could hear the wind, the waves, the rain, everything around you.
Talk me through how big these waves can get.
You can imagine you're sitting on your boat and the waves are coming from behind you and moving ahead of you. When these waves are low and rising upward, you'll feel a motion being pulled back. And when the waves are high and going down, you'll be pulled forward. So if the waves are long and small, you'll find yourself gently rocking back and forth. And that seems okay. That can happen at 1 meter, 2 meters, typical waves for the North Atlantic Ocean. But it's just when the winds are starting to pick up and the waves grow 3 meters, 5 meters, even 10 meters or more. And so you can be out there on the top of the wave and you can see all around you. And as you're going down the wave, it might feel like you're surfing.
Someone who's never been in that situation, would it feel a bit like a roller coaster?
I would say you could feel that motion of being like on a roller coaster. And it's so important to know which way the waves are coming from so you can orient your rowboat and you're not knocked over.
Because that's the real fear, isn't it? You'll be pitched over.
That's right. So you could be out there during the storm, and when the storm is picking up, the clouds are thickening, darkening, the lightning flashing, and the cold rain falling on you. And the wind picking up, howling. That is a very frightening picture of what it could potentially look like during the storm. And during those conditions, there's nothing you can really do out there but just crawl inside that little space you have in your boat, sealing the hatch and waiting out the storm. And you can imagine the waves coming from all different directions, knocking the boat around. And you'll have to strap yourself in. Some people even wear helmets so they don't get knocked over by these waves.
It just sounds terrifying.
That's right. And I've never done anything quite like that. I've spent days and weeks aboard research vessels, but nothing quite like where you're alone by yourself on a little rowboat.
You mentioned before about the chance of storms and hurricanes. What is the chance of a hurricane at that time of year?
The chances of hurricanes happening is extremely rare, but we do know that it is possible for hurricanes to form during the December-January months. So for the Northern Hemisphere, the hurricane season is traditionally between June and November. But in the 2016 race, a Category 1 hurricane, Alex, formed in January in the Bahamas. And it was the first system to develop in January since 1938.
So they'll be hoping for not a repeat of that.
That's right. So it's extremely rare, but it is possible that hurricanes could potentially form. And it will be so important for all the racers to be finding out where the storms are happening and if that could potentially impact their travel across the North Atlantic.
In those hurricane conditions, what are you looking at as far as, wave size and wind strength?
During a hurricane, you may have wind gusts reaching well over 45 knots. You can develop waves that are 20 to 30 foot. Downright frightening.
It is. And what about the rain? It would just be, is it torrential rain? Sitting on a rowboat, it's the type of rain that would hurt the skin.
That's right. So if you're out in the storm, you can imagine all this cold, wet rain just coming down on you. And you have so little protection just being out there on your rowboat. You'll have to go inside and hide out the storms.
Michelle has already faced her fair share of storms, but the thing that's hampered her the most might be surprising. After clocking an unusually slow 24 hours, Michelle investigated and found a colony of pippies had grown underneath the hull of her rowboat. She was forced to climb overboard to clean them off to reduce drag.
It takes me about 45 minutes to clean the hull, and it's very exhausting. So, the procedure is I would hook my foot underneath the keel, and then this hand would be holding onto my grab line. You then take a big breath. You have a scraper in this hand. I drag myself under and I use my leg to help stabilise me underneath my boat. So now I'm laying upside down on a platform that's bobbing around up and down while I'm scrape, come out, take a big breath, go again. And I get quite dizzy. I don't know, I feel quite disorientated. Maybe it's the whole bobbing and holding your breath. And I practiced it every time I went out in Sydney Harbour. I would make myself go overboard.
Dr. Jessica says she would have encountered all sorts of creatures out there.
So as you're crossing the North Atlantic, it's full of marine life, including fish, whales, sharks, dolphins, and turtles. So it depends on what exact time Michelle chooses and where to clean her boat. She may find herself swimming with dolphins. I imagine it to be a very magical experience.
I think the swimming with the dolphins part she's good with. It's the everything else that's out in the water that potentially frightens her.
I would also feel terrified being all alone, strapped to my boat, knowing that if I were to be disconnected from the boat in some way, I could easily go adrift. I would also feel that terror on the ocean if I had to clean my boat going into the water.
Michelle had anticipated this terror, though, and planned ahead.
Okay, so I've got these two additional, I'm calling them my pantries. I've got a sweet pantry and a savoury pantry, which is dedicated to additional food. So if morale's a bit low, I'll certainly reach for the sweet pantry. There is packets of Tim Tams, whole fruit cakes, lots of custard, Nutri-Grain, whole milk, so milk in not powdered milk, long life milk, that's going to be a massive luxury. Cans of Milo, Ovaltine, Saunders malt that I eat off the spoon, that's really sticky, gooey malt, high carbohydrate, lots of calories. Then my savoury pantry is almost empty. It's got some chips and some biscuits, some rice cakes. I need to put some more in there. It's got nuts, salty cashews and stuff like that.
She tells us she also packed a tiny bottle of champagne to celebrate Christmas Day. Next time on A While Away, we catch up with Michelle's nearest and dearest.
We love you and we hope she's safe.
That and more next week. A While Away is produced by Claire Christensen, Erin Rohn, Ria Abraham and me, Lisa Goddard. Audio mixed by Mark Wright. Recorded on location in Michelle's home country, Australia, and in the studios of Adoni Media. You can find us online at adonimedia.com.au, or you can subscribe wherever you normally find your favourite podcasts. Till next week, thanks for listening.